Okay, welcome back, students, to our Time Machine Zaption. I hope you used those 5 minutes to practice your Quizlet vocabulary words. Before we begin reading the new chapter, let's review how Chapter 1 ended. Here's a picture of the time traveler coming out of his workshop. His clothes are filthy. Looking at this paragraph, clothes are filthy, his hair was messy, he had a small cut on his face, and his hair was even gray. "What's wrong?" I asked. "Where have you been?" "I have been to the future. I barely made it back alive. I must eat, then I will tell you the entire story after dinner." So now, let's hear that story. Chapter 2, The Machine Began to Shake. The time traveler begins to tell his dinner guests about his trip to the future. It was obvious that the time traveler had not eaten a good meal in days. We all sat at the table in silence, barely touching our food, while the time traveler ate everything he saw. After 15 minutes without a word, I finally spoke. "How long are you going to keep us waiting? You must know that we are anxious to hear about where you've been. You look as though you were sleeping outdoors for days and days. Please, tell us what happened." "I cannot eat and tell a story at the same time. I only have one mouth," the time traveler said while still chewing his food. After another few bites, he finally sat back and said, "Okay, let's please go into the library. This story is too long to be told over filthy plates." As we all settled into our seats, I once again broke the silence. "Have you been traveling through time?" I asked cautiously. "Is that why you look so bad?" "Of course that is where I've been. I will tell you the entire story, but I want to make it clear that there are to be no interruptions from anyone while I'm talking. It is a very long and detailed story, and it will take entirely too much time if you ask me questions." We all agreed, got comfortable in our chairs, and sat back as the time traveler began to tell the most amazing and unbelievable story I had ever heard. After dinner last week, I went into my workshop to make a few adjustments to the full-size time machine. I originally thought that I needed another few days to finish it, but after only an hour or two, it was ready to be tested. I thought about waiting until morning, but I was too excited to see if it would work. I sat down, took a deep breath, and pushed the lever forward very slowly. The machine began to shake just a bit, and I could see a light flashing outside the window, which confused me at first. Then I realized that it was not a light at all. It was the sun rising and setting very quickly. I wanted to travel far into the future, so I pushed the lever forward a little more. The machine shook even more, and the workshop around me became blurry. Finally, the walls were gone, and I was outdoors, traveling so fast that decades were passing by each second. I pushed the lever even further. At this point, centuries were passing in the blink of an eye. You must understand that I was not physically moving. The time machine stayed in the same place as time passed around me. I could see buildings rise and fall in seconds. I pushed the lever all the way forward until 1,000 years were passing with each second. Entire civilizations were created, then destroyed, before I could even get a good look at anything. Eventually, the buildings stopped rising and nature took over. An entire forest would suddenly surround the time machine, but would then be replaced by buildings again just as quickly. This cycle happened 5 or 6 times. I looked at my watch and realized that I had been sitting in the time machine for about 15 minutes. I wanted to stop and walk around a bit to see if I could find any humans this far into the future. In my excitement, I pulled the lever back too quickly, which caused the time machine to shake violently, and I was thrown into the air. I landed on the ground about 10 feet away from the machine and laid there, stunned for a minute. When I finally opened my eyes, I found myself lying next to a huge white statue in the middle of a beautiful forest. I stumbled back to the time machine and sat down. It It took a few minutes before I could think straight. I felt shaken after traveling that quickly through time, and being thrown into the air and landing on the hard ground did not help that feeling. I looked down at the machine and was shocked to see that I had ended up in the year 802,701. I sat and studied the statue. It was some kind of white stone or marble, and it was shaped like a sphinx with wings. It stood about 5 meters high, and there was a large door at the bottom. Just as I stood up to study the door, I got my first look at a very strange creature of the future. And that is the end of Chapter 2. Please make sure you answer all of the questions that are in this week's Zaption. Good luck and goodbye.